I'm walking through the Reformation series that Desiring God put together to give you a fuller history of Christianity. Join me.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into the story of a figure from the Reformation you might think you know, but I'm betting you don't know the whole story. We're talking about Balthasar Hübmaier.
So when you hear that name, Balthasar Hübmaier, this is probably what pops into your head. A brilliant theologian, a courageous reformer. He was a key player in the Anabaptist movement, the so-called radical reformers who felt the big-name guys weren't pushing things nearly far enough. This was a man who absolutely wasn't afraid to rock the boat.
And for a lot of people, this is where his story ends, right here, burned alive in Vienna for his faith. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful image, right? It's the kind of ending that makes him a legend, a true symbol of standing by your beliefs no matter what.
But is that really the whole story? I think you know where I'm going with this. That heroic tale is great, it's inspiring, but it skips over some of the most fascinating and, frankly, the most important parts of his life.
Okay, so first things first, let's just quickly run through the popular version of the story, the one you'd probably find in a textbook. It's the classic hero's journey.
And it's a great story. You've got all the pieces, right? A super smart scholar, studies under a famous name, sees the light, and embraces these new Reformation ideas. He becomes a leader of the radical Anabaptists, pushing for things like believers' baptism and separating church and state. He gets tortured, even recants for a bit under all that pressure, but in the end, he's executed for his faith. His wife, too, drowned just days later. It's dramatic, it's inspiring, it's a heck of a story.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when we put that story under the microscope, when we really start digging into the historical record? Well, let's just say some pretty big pieces of the puzzle start to show up missing. So, check this out. The point here isn't that the story is wrong exactly. It's selective. The basic timeline, his key beliefs, that's all pretty solid. But look at what's missing. A really dark early chapter involving anti-Semitism? Yeah, that's usually left out. The big, complex debates he had with other reformers like Zwingli? Totally simplified. And this idea of him being some isolated radical thinker? That completely ignores where his ideas actually came from. Deep, deep roots in early Christian history.
All right, let's start filling in those blanks. And we're going to start with maybe the single biggest idea that the hero story just glosses right over, his radical concept of freedom. Get a load of this. In 1524, he writes, "The heretic is to be overcome with scripture, not with fire." Now you got to remember, this is an age where everybody, Catholics, Protestants, you name it, was burning heretics at the stake. And here's Hübmaier saying, no, you can't force faith, you can't use violence or the government to make someone believe. That was absolutely revolutionary.
And to put that into perspective, look at this timeline. He's publishing these ideas in the 1520s. The guy we usually credit with these thoughts, the famous philosopher John Locke, he doesn't publish his big A Letter Concerning Toleration until 1689. That's over a century and a half later. Hübmaier was so far ahead of his time, it's kind of staggering.
But wait, there's another twist in the story. Because as radical as this idea was for his time, it wasn't actually new. See, Hübmaier wasn't pulling this out of thin air. He was reaching way, way back and reviving something ancient.
I mean, just look at this side by side. Hübmaier in 1524 says faith is a free work of God, not the government's business. Now look at Tertullian, an early church father, writing way back around 197 AD. He says it's not in the nature of religion to compel religion. It's almost the exact same argument, separated by 1,300 years. Hübmaier was basically skipping over the entire Middle Ages and tapping right back into the source.
And that's the key, right? He didn't see himself as a radical innovator. He saw himself as a restorer. He was digging up these ancient Christian sources to argue that his ideas, like believers' baptism and a voluntary church, weren't new inventions. He believed he was simply restoring what the church was always meant to be.
So, okay, we've added all this complexity. Why does it matter? Why is this fuller, more nuanced story of Hübmaier so important? What's the big deal about looking past the simple hero story?
Well, it matters because while the simple hero story is inspiring, the full story is what really instructs us. It shows us a man who was flawed, who made terrible mistakes, that anti-Semitism we mentioned, and then evolved, repented, and changed. It shows that his moment of weakness when he recanted was part of a larger human transformation.
It proves that this modern ideal of religious freedom isn't just some invention of the Enlightenment. It has deep, deep roots in the Reformation itself. At the end of the day, the messy, complete story is just so much more powerful, isn't it?
And that really leaves us with a huge question to think about. Hübmaier's story is a perfect reminder that behind almost every simple hero tale, there's a much more complex, more challenging, and honestly, a more human story waiting to be told. So it makes you wonder, what other histories have we simplified, and what important truths might we be missing because of it?